This is chapter 31 of The Night Singer. 31. There's always a chance they're lying, said Ove, giving the drawer in his desk a look of such longing that Hannah came close to getting up and opening it for him. Tilde and Lucas could have come up with the story to shift the blame onto Fanny. Yeah, but 3 people definitely find it easier to move a body, said Eric. What a turncoat, Hannah thought. It seemed far more likely that Joel had walked off on his own, as both Lucas and Tilde claimed, and that Fanny had followed him, something Eric had said he agreed with just a few minutes earlier. Fanny had a history of violence, and Hannah didn't think Tilde was capable of lying like that, not based on their interview with her. Still, they couldn't afford to narrow their focus too much. I'll send forensics to the woods behind Guardby School, said Ove. That might be where Joel was killed. Find Fanny and put more pressure on her. Ove was talking unusually quickly, probably because he was eager to get rid of them. Can we get her DNA? Asked Hannah. Absolutely. I'll clear it with the prosecutor. Hannah and Eric didn't even have time to leave Ove's office before he pulled out the drawer and they heard the sound of a plastic wrapper being torn from a carton of cigarettes. I think we need to pay Fanny another visit, said Hannah. She's hardly going to come down to the station voluntarily. I agree, said Eric, but I'll try calling her anyway. See if you can get a hold of her mother. They split up, Hannah returning to her desk. Neither of them had managed to speak to Fanny's mother yet, and she got no further than voicemail again this time. Fanny's father, Hans Broberg, was registered at the same address and had been released from prison 6 or so months earlier after serving a 2-year sentence for smuggling narcotics. There were no details about what he was doing now, nor where he was currently living, and the mobile phone registered in his name was switched off. Eric came over with one of the technicians in tow. Fanny didn't answer, and according to her school, she hasn't been in all week. I think we should go over there and try our luck. I'm guessing you didn't manage to get a hold of her mother? Hannah shook her head and got to her feet. In the car, Eric explained that Ove wanted them to join the technicians at Guardby School, both to help them get set up and to liaise with staff there. The prosecutor had already agreed to them swabbing Fanny Broberg for DNA and taking her fingerprints. They crossed the bridge in single file, a patrol car, the technician's van, plus their unmarked car. Pulling up by the school, Hannah told the others to wait outside. The yard was empty, and the moment she reached for the white wooden handrail at the side of the steps, she felt a pang of longing. Life had been good here. It was only when she moved into year 6 that everything had changed. In the years that followed, she has occasionally returned to Guardby School in an attempt to cling to everything that had once been good. Perhaps that drive was the same as Fanny's, just expressed in a different way. Hannah had dragged Rebecca to all kinds of rummage sales and plays there. She pushed open the green door. It was almost 20 years since she had last set foot inside, but the building smelled the same as ever. There was no one in the office, so Hannah knocked on one of the classroom doors and asked the teacher to step out into the corridor. The teacher was far too young to have worked at the school while Hannah was a student. She was probably around her age, in fact, wearing jeans and a knitted sweater with a small goatee. He was also taller than her. He introduced himself as Isaac. Isaac Oslin? She said. Yes, I spoke to one of your colleagues yesterday. What is this about? Our forensics technicians need to search behind the school. Can I ask why? Afraid not. Have you spoken to the principal? No. Then I'd like to call and let her know. That's fine. Could you keep an eye on the children while I'm gone? Isaac laughed when he saw the look on Hannah's face. Don't worry, I'm not asking you to go in. Just standing here will be fine. Hannah nodded as the familiar damned redness spread across her cheeks. There was a window in the door, and she moved over so that she could peer into the room. She could see around 20 young children inside. Hannah had no memories from her first few years at the school, nothing but the sense that she had been happy here. What she did remember was the woods, and how she and Rebecca had pretended to be astronauts landing on alien planets there. A child appeared in the window, pulling faces at her. Hannah stuck out her tongue. She regretted it almost immediately as Isaac came around the corner, but he just smiled and waved for the girl to sit down. How long can you wait? He asked. Why? The principal doesn't think the children should be here during the search. She's given them the rest of the day off, but some will need to be picked up, and that'll probably take a little while. I don't think we can wait, said Hannah, but I'll talk to the technicians. The area they need to search is set back from the school itself, in the woods. Isaac thanked her and stepped back into the classroom. Just a few seconds later, she heard the children cheer. Without warning, a memory came flooding back to her. Hannah was sitting in a classroom just like this, and their teacher had told them that school was over for the day. The power had gone out and didn't seem to be coming back. On another occasion, the school had closed because there was so much snow no one could actually get to it. An unknown number flashed on Hannah's phone. She didn't want to answer, but knew she had no choice. It could be something to do with the investigation. This time, the fire barely had time to take hold before she ended the call. What was next? Would they start a real fire? With another quick glance at the classroom, Hannah headed outside and let the technicians know what was happening. They didn't look particularly happy to learn that dozens of children were about to come charging out of the building, but their investigation would likely take some time, and they obviously couldn't keep the children locked inside while they worked. Announcing their arrival in advance hadn't been an option either. That would simply provide an opportunity to remove or plant evidence. Hannah didn't bother asking whether they could wait. That was just something she had told Isaac because it was easier than saying no. She followed the technicians around the building and showed them into the woods, which weren't particularly big. She pointed out the rough area Lucas and Tilde had given her, and the uniformed officers began setting up the cordon. It was the only way to keep curious eyes away. Hannah and Eric made their way over to Fanny's house. This time, the yard out front was empty, possibly because it was a few degrees colder than it had been the previous day. The sky was gray. "Come in!" Fanny yelled as they knocked on the door of the main building. Eric opened it, and they stepped inside over a pile of shoes. They found Fanny on the sofa watching TV. "Why don't you answer your phone?" asked Hannah. The mess in the living room reminded her of the second half of her childhood, the part she never wanted to revisit. Empty bottles, overflowing ashtrays, mountains of clothes on the floor. Hannah had often tried to keep the place neat and tidy, but she hadn't always managed. Social services had paid a couple of visits because of concerns about Christopher, and she had always made sure to tidy up beforehand, force Lars to stop drinking. It had been the same whenever Granny came over, though she always noticed anyway. Once, after a visit to Garby, she had asked whether Hannah wanted to come and live with her instead, telling her she didn't have to take responsibility for those two. Hannah repeated her question. "Why don't you answer your phone?" "I don't feel like it." It was an obvious attempt to sound cocky, but it failed. Fanny was sitting with her knees drawn into her chest, hugging them tight. She was wearing the same black t-shirt as before, but had swapped the jeans for a pair of gray sweatpants. Her self-confident veneer was gone, possibly because it had been easier for her to stand up to them outside while she was working on her moped, though that was hardly the only reason. Her hands were cleaner now, and Hannah could see that several of her knuckles were split. "Tilde and Lucas have given us a different version of what happened in the woods." "Well, whatever they said, they're exaggerating," said Fanny. "They always do." Her eyes didn't leave the TV for a second. On the screen, a couple of teenagers were standing by an enormous window, peering down at a planet. Perhaps Fanny had dreamed of being an astronaut, too. Eric moved over to the TV and switched it off. "Hey, what the hell?" Fanny snapped. Her tone was uncertain again. She sounded more afraid than angry. "They both admit that you hit him," said Eric, "and that the three of you kicked him once he was on the ground." "Yeah, we slapped him around a bit, but that's it. It really wasn't a big deal." "So why did you lie about it?" Hannah moved a shoebox from an armchair and sat down, but Eric chose to remain standing. "I'm not stupid. I knew how it would look." "Did you spit on Joel?" "Who said that?" Once Fanny realized that neither of them planned to answer, she continued. "I might have spat a bit when I was talking to him." Hannah leaned forward in her chair. "What happened after Joel pulled out the knife?" she asked. "He was waving it around and screaming like a total psycho, so we let him go." Eric showed Fanny the picture of the knife. "Was this it?" "Don't know." "Where did you go when you left?" asked Hannah. "Home. Can anyone confirm that?" "Well, my mom definitely can't. She has to pop pills to get to sleep." Hannah assumed that Fanny used both her parents to get a hold of drugs to sell. "Where is your dad?" she asked. "I don't fucking know. Haven't seen him in months." "Is it his hash you've been selling?" Fanny stared at her. The pleading look in her eyes tied a knot in Hannah's stomach. "I don't sell hash," she said. "Anyone who says I do is a liar." "Did you see Joel again on your way home?" "No." "Are you sure about that?" "Yeah." Fanny turned to Eric. "Is she always this thick?" Eric replied by taking out the DNA kit, and the teenager finally lost out to her fear. "You're not putting that fucking stick in my mouth," she shouted. "I'm sorry, but you don't have a choice," said Hannah. "If you don't do this voluntarily now, you'll have to come down to the station with us." Fanny reluctantly agreed to be tested, but as Eric put the DNA kit away and took out the fingerprint kit, her fear turned to panic. "No!" Fanny roared. "You fuckers are trying to frame me for this."